So thank you for showing up and giving us your time. It's going to be a nice, enjoyable hour. Welcome to our 2023 State of Inclusion, where we are carrying this year's theme of joyful, purposeful growth. The speakers you're going to hear from this evening are going to be, of course, our head of school, Julian Bull, and myself. I'm Chris Dennis, Associate Head of Community Engagement. And let's get going. So as we start, we want to try to give you some information on what you're going to see today. We're going to focus on 4 key areas. We're going to get some remarks from Julian and some things he'd like to share. We're going to get into the survey themes of our faculty staff survey, our student surveys through Challenge Success, and our family survey, which we'll spend probably the majority of the time on this evening. Also, we're going to zoom in a little bit on DEIJ, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and we're going to look at the year ahead. So with joyful, purposeful growth, we're going to see many more smiling faces across the school year. So we begin with a look at our mission, the thing that brings us together holistically. Campbell Hall's community of inquiry, committed to academic excellence and the nurturing of decent, loving, and responsible human beings. I like to say this is what we all agreed to when we chose to work here, send our students here, and if we're ever in conflict or in disconnect, we should be able to return to this mission to anchor us back to what we began, the thing that actually anchors us together. Very closely connected to our mission is our DEIJ statement. As you can see, it is very substantial. I'm not going to read everything word for word, but I draw your attention to the areas in bold, and I'll read those for you. We are committed to confronting racism, bigotry, and bias in all their forms and ensuring that every community member feels safe, accepted, seen, and heard. We are listening and we are working to dismantle systems of oppression by creating policies, programs, and opportunities with DEIJ as the driving force. I read these underlined in bold sections to understand this is where my team is going to spend their focus this year, of really making sure we're upholding the essence of this statement. But it is aligned, it is connected, it is in partnership, in concert with our school mission. As we roll into conversation today, I just want to remind you of some norms that we'd like to keep. The first is a commitment to deep listening as we get into the question session, or as you hear from Julian and myself. I want you to make sure that you're giving yourself a chance to kind of hear what we're saying and seek to understand and then be understood. Consider other perspectives. We are a community of over 1,200 students, numerous families that cover many generations, and everyone's perspective is valid, is relevant, and necessary. But we want to make sure that we're considering these perspectives before we rule them out. Also, lean into discomfort. That's where the learning is. That's where the exchange is. And my favorite norm of all, expect and acknowledge a lack of closure. We may be able to put everything in a box and tie it up with a nice bow, but there may be some things where we can't. And lastly, when we have conflict and disconnect, let's try to think of the systems we're trying to correct and not necessarily attack or judge the person. What are the systems that are going to help take care of us all? Okay. So with that, I pass the mic over to our favorite head of school, the world famous Julian Bull. All right.
I'm probably also your least favorite head of school, right? I'm the only head of school, I think. Good evening, everybody. First of all, in case anybody from the city of Los Angeles is listening, we do not have over 1,200 students because that would violate our conditional use permit, 1,156. So, good evening, everybody, and great to see you online as well as in Carsey here. And I also just want to say at the beginning how much I appreciate my partnership with Chris, his whole team for sure. But the dialogue and the conversation that Chris and I have really encapsulates what I consider high quality equity work and all of the norms that Chris was just talking about. I personally learned a great deal from him, and I feel like we learn from each other. And he brings his expertise in decades of professional equity work. I bring my background in Episcopal identity, but we all also appreciate what the other is bringing and are constantly finding how it all works out together. So, and in that context, I think I will, I like to begin these sessions by going a little bit deeper into the mission as Chris was just describing it, in particular, the jumping pads, more specific jumping pads from the mission into the work of inclusion and equity. So these are 3 slides that I showed to new faculty and staff at the orientation for them a couple of weeks ago. And they do get training in what it means to be an Episcopal school and what it means to be Campbell Hall in particular. And this has evolved a great deal over the last decade, really, particularly since 2015, when Chaplain Hull and I really engaged into a very close working partnership with Lisa Miller, who, as many of you know, is laser focused on spiritually healthy young people, how schools can raise and create the context, the culture for spiritually healthy young people. And spiritually healthy young people are also psychologically, emotionally healthy young people. And this is research driven on her part, just as we seek to be research driven on our side. So as many of you know, she has shown really very, very convincingly that the diseases of despair that we hear about among young people, we're talking about anxiety and depression and worse, that the most impactful thing that we can do is help them nurture their own spiritual core, their own inner being. And then the question becomes, what does that mean? And that's what we've been talking about now. Been talking about it for a long time, but certainly for the last 8 years or so in the context of her research. Now, this slide, is it sharing screen here? Yeah. Sharing, okay. So this slide is a list of 10 characteristics of a spiritually supported school that Lisa and her associates came up with after doing field research that included Campbell Hall as one of the 13 sites. And combining all of their field research, they came up with these 10 characteristics. And if you look at just the first one, that in a school that supports the spirit of young people as well as adults, young people feel respected, understood, and loved. Every single young person, that's the ideal, that every single young person can feel respected and loved for who they are. Not loved conditionally if they fit into the preordained identity of the school, but loved for who they are in their own identity. And identities shift and change, but this is a community where we engage in that growth together. I'll say more about that in a minute. So that, in a sense, that's the characteristic that really anchors inclusion work, because if the data shows that somebody doesn't feel seen for who they actually are, that they feel like they're being asked to fit into as a round peg trying to fit into a square hole, then we need to pay attention to that and not just write it off. They develop a sense of self-worth, meaning, purpose, a sense of wonder, sense of knowledge, reverence for the mystery of being. They learn to care for their heart, their deep inner core, as well as their body and mind. These things are important because sometimes in some of the feedback we got on our surveys this year, as in every year, you have some people, it's a small minority of voices, but some people saying diversity work is divisive. You know, why can't we all just sort of move towards a common sense of identity? And you see in our mission, there is that deeper world, that spiritual world that we do belong to. And it's mysterious how we're all connected, but every day on this campus, particularly in chapel, but in all kinds of other activities too, there's this exploration of what brings us all together? What is the journey that we're on together, that we're all on together? And so that my sense of purpose and my sense of self-worth and my sense of identity connects with yours, which is different, but we can do some work together. And that inner care and that inner sense of self-worth is so vital to this work. And as you can just see from the words themselves, so deeply connected to social emotional learning, to mental health. And all of those folks here work together. The counselors work with the DIJ team, who work with the advisors and the chaplains and everybody else. Self-care, of course, is connected to moral development. It's not just about ourselves, but it's then about how do we treat other people. By the way, there are some of the comments, again, in the surveys, a frequent concern about somebody not being included is people saying there still is bullying at Campbell Hall. There still is meanness. There still are cliques. People get left out. We know that. We know that. We live here every day. I am sorry to say this is not a campus without sin. You know, it's part of the real world, but we are pushing hard to do the best we can to encourage moral development, to hold people accountable for their behavior. Chris is going to talk about that more. Can we get the next slide there, or do I move it? Okay. And then, of course, so moving from again self-care to moral development to developing caring relationships, and we work on that on so many levels. Democracy and social justice. So we need to educate our children to be part of a diverse democracy with very different kinds of people. Our country's not doing a very good job at that right now, but we are determined to do absolutely the best we can on our own little campus here. We're committed to compassion and service. We try to connect kids to nature in our little plot here next to the freeway and in Studio City, but it's actually the campus every year. I noticed this summer when we started up again is increasingly really beautiful.
You need to mark your.
And then finally, joy, whole being. They
You need
experience.
a marker stamp a bingo. So then always.
Okay, can you mute yourselves, please? There, I think there's somebody coming through. And then finally, they experience the joy that creativity and the blooming of one's whole being can bring. And that emphasis on joy is really part of our whole direction for everybody for the whole year. Joyful, purposeful growth. For me, for Chris, for his team, this is joyful work. It doesn't mean there isn't hard work. There aren't tough conversations. You know, if you're taking a hard look at the data that you get back, sometimes you get disappointed in yourself and in the community. But there's also incredible vibrancy in a place like this. And this beautiful little 15-acre campus is just such a wonderful microcosm of what we can be when we really work hard to build the beloved community. It's hard work. It's not just words. It's also really committed deeds. But it is, in fact, joyful. The last slide I'll show is something that we show teachers of our developing sort of educational philosophy in the ways that it relates traditional academic learning to moral and social and emotional and spiritual learning. And at Campbell Hall and in the Episcopal tradition, those are connected seamlessly. You see at the start of the cycle, teachers structure experiences and they give students class setups and labs and readings and context to, experience something in some way. And trying to garner insights and knowledge and growth in content learning and growth in mastery of material. But that's never the end. Critical thinking is so crucial, but in the lives of all of us, and particularly in young people, there's always the question, so what? What does this mean? I give the example, you're studying American history. First of all, you have to know what actually happened, and it's complex. You have to look at lots of sources and talk to lots of people and keep your head on as you're looking at all those different sources when you try to figure out what actually is the history of this country. And so where are we now and where are we going? But then what do I do with that information? And I promise you, the young people on campus are asking that question all the time. And teachers have to take that into account, because if they don't, students are not going to be engaged. If the response of the school is, we can't talk about that, that's too controversial or whatever, we're not imposing ideologies, but we're honoring these young people and their hearts and their desire to make sense of all this and to figure out, how do I become a faithful participant in this myself? What are my gifts? What do I have to give? What's my path? And so, and we're always talking about, as in our mission statement, which Chris highlighted, becoming decent, loving, responsible human beings, discerning what's the greatest good for the greatest number. And what does that, again, really mean? And then finally, telling our stories, listening to each other's stories, listening to the wonderful, great variety of stories that people tell, the great traditions, the great scriptures from all traditions and all parts of the world. But this is not divisive work. We are different. We have different stories to tell. And sometimes we don't agree on some fairly important things. But this is joyful community building work, and we remain committed to what Dr. King called building the beloved community. That's always been our mission. It remains our mission. I think in the last few years, because we were held to account, but however it happened, particularly in the last few years, we are doing that work better than ever because we're holding ourselves accountable more than ever. And just a reminder that this evening is part of that. We do surveys, and then we come back and we tell you what the survey said. We share the data. And that's what we work on all year long. What did the data say, and how are we going to approach it? And which voices are telling us we need to do work where? So that's the big story. And when people say things like some, a minority, do in the comments, say things like, well, for example, the affinity groups are divisive. That's not the opinion of the people who are participating in them. People vote with their feet to be in those affinity groups, both the adults and the students, and they do it because it helps them in terms of their own identity development, and it helps them in terms of having sort of a subculture where they can belong, and then spend most of their day actually in this larger culture, telling that larger story and engaging in that broader dialogue. So Chris is going to take us into some of that data and in some of the specifics of our work this year that we gleaned from the data. And if you have any questions about what I said, just hold them till the end, and we'll take them all together right at the end. Thank you very much. Back to Chris.
All right. Thank you, sir. And before we move off of this slide, I want to use it to kind of prepare us for what we're going to see in the survey data. So if you will, before we take a survey, your day-to-day experience in our community is just that. It's at the top of this circle. You are in the experience. When we offer a survey, that's our attempt to know what we're feeling, what we're sensing from the community. But we get a chance to actually know because we've asked, right? From there, we're able to sit with our leadership group and really synthesize the information and think about, well, what is this telling us? What else do we know to be true? Where have we gone? Where are we trying to go? In that discernment, it can really reveal some things that are truly difficult to really absorb, but we go through it with love. We understand that people are communicating with us because they need to share something. And from that discernment and loving, we get to the point to where we can actually tell the story. And we repeat again. And I think that's one of the good things about having a meeting like this so early in the school year, is because we get to be accountable to the information we've received with a fresh start in front of us. And as you look at the center of this holistic growth cycle, authenticity and spiritual core, I think that's essential. It's kind of protecting, what's most sacred for all of us. And if we can understand that we're all a part of this together, we're also going to be able to understand that we can grow from this. And that's what we want our students to do. So now we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the slides from the family survey results in a snapshot. So what we see here on the screen, we've got two questions that are outlining a couple things. The first one, Q9, talks about how much of a sense of belonging does your child feel at Campbell Hall? Now, we had 462 family representatives participate in the survey. I think it's a little lower than we had last year, but overall, 58% felt like there was a tremendous amount of belonging, with another 39% saying that there's some belonging. So overall, very high sense of belonging from the parents' perspective of their child's sense of belonging at school. Again, this is the family survey. These are one adult in the house filled the survey out to represent the family. And only 1.9% felt like their child communicated to them that they don't belong at all. I think that's really important to understand. Over here in the right corner for Q10, how well do you feel Campbell Hall is preparing your child for the next academic year? And in this one, 64% felt extremely well about the preparation, another 34% somewhat well. Again, only 1.5% felt like they were not preparing their student at all. So overall, positive outcomes here on preparation and belonging. Questions 21 and 17. I'll start on my right here. Q17, given your child's cultural background, how good a fit is Campbell Hall? 71% said an extremely good fit, 71%. And another 26% somewhat good, okay? So on our scale, 2.2% of the folks felt like it wasn't a good fit at all, okay? So when we think about belonging and a cultural fit, we're in really good shape here, okay? And again, these are parent voices, right? This isn't Chris's assumption here. Now, one that my own family kind of cringes at a little bit here in question number 21, in an average day, how many hours of screen time in front of computers, television, texting, video games, et cetera, does your child spend? This would have been a really good quiz question for the group, but it looks like the majority of our cohort spends about 3 to 5 hours a day in front of a screen. That's about 49%. What we didn't dig into in this number, how much of that is Campbell Hall related screen time, doing school activities, or in class use of technology. But you can look at the research and the statistics on screen time. We're probably at our peak at 3 to 5. Once we get over to 6 to 8 hours, we're getting into a little bit of excessive use. And these are things that parents have pointed out to us, screen time being quite significant. So 49% of our respondents are within that 3 to 5 hour screen time range. And that definitely contributes to some of the things that our students are feeling as far as being connected, friendships, and things of that nature. We also want to keep in mind that this is coming out of pandemic experiences where the devices were pretty much all they had to stay connected. So unwinding that is going to take its own journey. So here on the left, question 34, how confident are you that Campbell Hall is supporting your child socially and emotionally? So here we see a little bit of a split across the scale here. 32% are extremely confident that we're supporting children socially and emotionally, with another 38% quite confident, and another 25% somewhat confident. 4% feel like we are not confident at all in our ability to support socially and emotionally. And it's interesting that the split is between somewhat through extremely confident. I would have assumed that we would have been higher on the extremely confident just because of the relationships that are built and the things that are there. But it's also an indicator that we kind of separate from belonging to feeling support socially and emotionally. This could indicate resources that need to be put in place. Maybe they need more time with a counselor. Maybe they need more time in the chaplain's office and things of that nature. So this is an opportunity for us to dig into that deeper, but there is a range. In question 25 on the right, how much does the school value the diversity of the children's background? 72% felt like a tremendous amount. 26% felt some, but not just under 1% felt like we don't value it at all, okay? So again, belonging, cultural fit, valuing the diversity of our students' background, all high regards, okay? These things are important when we think about the overall experience of every student, okay? Anytime that there's a student that's feeling like they belong, and that word is getting home, that means we're doing something well. I did want to point out just the distribution of the responses in the family survey. As you can see, like I said, we had 462 respondents, but not a ton of engagement across the board in the grades. Normally we see, higher participation in particular grades. It looks like our 10th grade class, now junior class, had the highest response rate at the time. So when we bring the survey back this year, we're going to look to have a bigger experience with that. The majority of the participants in the survey this year were our white families I believe that is at 68%, followed by our Asian families at 8%. So the distribution is pretty centralized in particular demographics here. But again, this is important for us to know, right? We want to know who's engaging in the surveys, the questions that are being answered, and the things that are coming up. So as Julian alluded to earlier, there were a couple themes that definitely stood out in the survey. And I would say, they're not in any particular ranked order, but these are worth talking about. So the first, bullying and friendships. There were a lot of comments about how students are transitioning between divisions, be it coming from elementary to middle, middle to high school, new families in any particular grade, it's not necessarily the easiest transition for everyone. And that could be because friendships grow in, they grow out. Sometimes the parent-to-parent relationships have to change as the kids are either exploring new friend groups. Things aren't always going to be the same. So it definitely gives us an indication that families want us to be a little bit more accountable when they report disconnect in friend groups. The reality on that is we may be able to do something about it, and in some cases we may not. What we can ask is that we partner together to figure out what's going to be the most responsible way to engage ourselves in our students' friendships. Because if we are going to overemphasize the adult perspective in age-appropriate friendships, we don't really understand the impact of alienating students when we do that. So we just want to make sure that we're actually being mindful of, okay, is this just a rain shower, a small rain shower? Is it sprinkling, or is this a storm? Because if it's a storm, we can prepare in a different way versus something that's going to be a little brief. All right. So we have resources in place to really unpack this. Sarah Huss does a tremendous job with parent education and human development to make sure we're unpacking the ways friendships come together. I'm partnering with the Parent Association to do our PA check-in chats, and a lot of the conversations we have is about parent to parent talking ourselves off of kind of the anxieties of getting involved too deep in friendship relationships. I do think it's important for parents to be able to communicate across friend groups. If you do see a significant problem, that's why we're in community. Pick up the phone with a loving question to figure out how can we help our kids work together. The next point I want to talk about is there's a portion of folks that are confused or not happy with our commitment to DEIJ. It's expressed in a number of different ways on a number of fronts. I would recommend that if you ever have a concern or a comment, come see me, come hang out. I've got a Calendly link. You can book your time anytime you want to come and really have a conversation that deserves the time it needs. I think in some cases, when we're communicating about not being happy with what the school's doing as far as equity work, it may be coming from a place of misinformation or not necessarily knowing the on-ramp for you to participate. But let me state clearly, everyone has an identity that deserves to be celebrated. That means no matter what you look like, where you come from, who you are, your identity explicitly deserves to be celebrated, and you should be happy within that. But it doesn't mean that you get to dictate what someone else can't have, okay? So when we talk about affinity groups, these are voluntary spaces that people have lived experience, they have in-identity membership, that they are choosing to spend their time in those spaces. Now, what we've learned is that there are families that would like additional spaces for additional exploration. And that's something we can accommodate. But it doesn't mean that we're going to accommodate that at the sake of taking something away from a traditionally marginalized group of people, especially in independent school spaces. So the independent school space, Campbell Hall's commitment to affinity groups will remain strong, but our commitment to anti-bias education will also remain strong and celebrating everybody's true identity, okay? The third point here is socioeconomic differences. This came up probably as the #1 response in the family survey last year. Families feeling the disconnect across socioeconomic lines. It feels like if you've got, monetary resources, it's respected differently in school spaces than if you do not. And quite honestly, that's a conversation we're going to have to prepare ourselves to have in a truly explorative way, because we don't want to alienate anyone on any particular side of this conversation. And socioeconomic status is something that is fluid. It's not a permanently fixed identity either. And it's something that we should know about, okay? And lastly, in the commentary, feeling seen and heard by the school. We try to give as many opportunities as we can for folks to come and talk to us and see us, and, between carpool and so many different, we're a social school. We're very social. We try to be as available as we can. And if we need to create more spaces, we'll find more ways. That may mean we have to go away from some of the traditional ways where we try to solicit information, but we're listening. We will continue to try to find additional ways for you to feel seen and heard by the school. Feeling seen and heard does not always mean we will agree with what you want us to do. It may not always mean we're going to agree with the pace at which you would like us to address something. Because we have to be accountable to the entire body as we make changes. So can we make a scalable, replicable response to something? If so, and we can do it well, we will probably do it well. But if doing one thing is going to cause a series of events that are not helpful to make sure that we're able to uphold our mission, we're probably going to just communicate that to you. Okay. And it doesn't mean you have to hide if we have disagreements, because it's a journey. If you don't like me in second grade, that's okay. I'm still going to be here when you're in eighth, and we can try again. Okay. But most of the experiences are not like that. So moving on from our family survey, we're going to take a look at some challenge success data. Challenge success is a rigorously studied research survey concept that really gives us a lot of deep information. So this one may be a little hard to see. It's hard to see in the room, so I know it's hard to see online. But essentially, there were categories of health and stress. This particular snapshot is from the high school, and I'll just read it for you a little bit here. So the top 3 markers of health and stress in our survey last year were grades, tests, quizzes, finals, or other assessments was our top line. About 70% of the students said that this was their highest indicator of stress in the high school, followed by overall workload and homework, and third, procrastination or time management. Okay, so when you wonder, is our school rigorous enough? Are the kids learning? Well, in the student's own voice, this is how they rank their stressors. A couple of other things I want to point out in the top 5, your future plans, lack of sleep. Down there a little bit further is probably about 7 or 8 is mental health issues, depression, or anxiety. So just to put everything in perspective, these are the categories of how students in the high school identified their stressors. Majority of that is academic, okay? And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something catastrophic. It means we need to explore that. Stand by. Pushing too many buttons here. Okay.
You want to read the bottom 3 there, Chris?
Yeah, so the bottom 3 stressors are lack of racial diversity in student body, lack of racial representation in the curriculum, and school safety. So let's take a look at what middle school's categories look like here. So in the middle school survey, their top 3 were, again, grades, tests, quizzes, other assessments, overall workload. And here's an interesting one: a lack of time to play, relax, or be with friends and family. And I think that's definitely developmentally on par with where our middle school students are. Our middle school is 2 very efficient years in their experience. And there's a lot of things happening in that time frame as we go along. Next, we have procrastination or time management. 5th, we have a specific class or classes. Right after that, we have peer relationships, including cliques, fitting in, and friendships. So it is in the top 10. Peer relationships is definitely in the top 10. So that gives us an opportunity as a school to think about how are we cultivating spaces to make things a little more transparent for students to identify when these things are coming up. And I think our middle school principal and the administration does a great job of thinking about those things, as well as all of our divisions. The bottom 3 here, sexual orientation or gender identity is not a huge indicator of health or stress. Identity-based discrimination or harassment, and school safety, once again, in our bottom 3. So here's a resource that we really found pretty interesting. Support at school. The percentage of students who feel they have an adult at school they can go to if they have a problem is at 79.6%. That's strong. The top 3 resources, teacher, advisor, athletic coach, or assistant coach. Very interesting. So while we understand, you know, the camaraderie of a team and being able to compete, the coaches that are just not necessarily always in a classroom are playing a huge role in student support at our school. And we are doing more to make sure our athletic coaches have additional skill sets and resources to be able to respond to this need, because they're playing a huge role. Followed by counselors, guidance, dean of students, grade level deans, and other staff. Very powerful. In the middle school, 73% feel like they have an adult at school that they can go to. Top 3, teacher, advisor, counselor or guidance counselor, school psychologist, social worker, our counseling staff, rounding out with our athletic coaches and deans. So it's really important to note that in the high school, almost 80%, in the middle school, over 70% feel like they have an adult they can go to on campus. I think that's something to be proud of, you know, to be able to be in these developmental stages and know that there's a person you can go to, sit in their office or just call their name, and they're going to slow down for you. They're going to stop what they're doing and they're going to check in on you, okay? So overall, our engagement in school has really given us some additional things to think about. So across the gender binary, we do have respondents who do not identify with boy or girl. However, statistically, it was not high enough to rank on our survey in this particular way, but we do have that information. The categories across the top you see are disengaged, doing school, purposefully engaged, and fully engaged. If you just look at that doing school column across gender, across race and ethnicity, it's pretty significant. Over half of our students kind of log in as doing school in this particular way. So our goal and our focus is to make sure we understand, what does that mean when we see students are doing school? Because we would want them to be, of course, on the far right side, fully engaged. We would love it if they were all fully engaged. But how can we get them to move from doing school to purposefully engaged? And does that mean we are asking the right questions in our survey, we have the right course offerings, et cetera? One of the ways we're going to be addressing this is some of the outcomes of our work last year, which one of those is our faculty evaluation process has expanded to get more feedback to our faculty on how they're doing, because that definitely directly impacts our students. Additionally, Challenge Success team is going to look into this data deeply beginning this year, and that's going to be a team of students, parents, and faculty to unpack this question of what does it mean to do school and how can we improve on that? And of course, we want to also address students that feel like they're disengaged and to what extent. As you can see on the gender scale, we've got 13% of young boys feeling disengaged, 5% of young girls feeling disengaged. Racially, ethnically, our Black and African-American students at 15% feeling disengaged, multiracial students at 14% feeling disengaged. So we do need to go deeper to understand, what does that mean? Is it an academic experience or is it a social experience? And we're going to do the work to unpack that further. And we've been doing great work under the leadership of our associate head for teaching and learning, Marina Keel. In the middle school, same rubric. And we can see that there's a different kind of a swing here in middle school. Middle school, we've got a lot more students purposefully engaged. And again, we know that it's a two-year window, so engagement there may have something to do with the duration of time they get to spend in that space, okay? I'm gonna keep going because I'm running out of my time. So next, we're gonna just take a quick look at faculty and staff, or our staffalty, and their experiences here. We've used the Culture Amp survey to really look at areas where we're really doing well and areas we can improve on. We spend much more time disclosing this to our faculty But in transparency, we're gonna share a snapshot with you as families. So our top 3 scores, 89% feel like they have the autonomy to perform their jobs effectively, a true hallmark of independent schools. 88% feel like they have access to the things they need to do their job well, and 88% are proud to work for Campbell Hall. I think pound for pound, our professional community here loves what they do. I tell folks, everybody here cares a lot, and that's important. Our lowest 3 scores, areas that we're going to continue to work on. When someone is not delivering in their role, we do something about it. The next is the right people are rewarded and recognized at Campbell Hall. And I've seen positive changes taking place based on previous employee survey results. So we know the work that we have to do, but it's a part of this holistic growth cycle, okay? Not only are we going to be transparent with ourselves, we're going to be transparent with families, we're going to be transparent with students. So in a response to these scores, we've already begun with community forums, with faculty and staff in separate sections. We're going to have frequent updates on just things that are going on. As you know, we're going to go into construction really soon, and members of the community want to know what's going on. So we're going to provide those updates. And our new faculty evaluation system will allow hopefully people to be able to get recognized in a regular cadence. So moving across to the deeper dive in the DEIJ snapshot here, I want to shout out the best team in Los Angeles that gets to do this work. We've got Toya Holiday, Sarah Huss, our newest formal member of the team, Leticia Sanchez McPherson, and of course, the world famous Vanita Harbor, and all of you. We do this work together. But I definitely wanted to shout them out because they do a huge lift in so many ways. And I just want to highlight their work as we get into it a little bit today. So really quickly, our approach once again is to anti-bias education in 4 domains. The first is identity, where everyone is able to have positive social identities, self-awareness, confidence, and family pride. So identity is kind of, that's the me, that's for me, right? Diversity is the we, where we express comfort and joy with difference and accurate language for our differences in those caring connections, okay? So I should be able to understand you, but you should also be able to be comfortable with who I am, okay? The last 2 is where Campbell Hall really sets itself apart with justice in action. Our students will tell you if something is unfair. There is not a grade in our school where they don't do that, all right? From kindergarten to 12th grade, they can recognize unfairness and tell you that it hurts, okay? But we do a great job of making sure our students are able to take action, demonstrate empowerment to act against prejudice and discriminatory actions, and even times when that means they're telling the school as an institution that we need to do better, okay? So we really try to prepare students to live the essence of anti-bias education in the work that we do. But how do we do that? So we do that through our policy. As you can see, we started off this meeting with our mission statement, our DEIJ statement. We do that every time we're in formal spaces. Our curriculum through identity safe classrooms, anti-bias curriculum redesign is still going strong. Programming such as events like this, where we're sharing experiences, and a new pillar of how we facilitate this work that we've just added, community building, where we develop the strategies and systems to help us strengthen our bonds to one another. I think that's where we're going to spend a lot of time this year, making sure that as the microphone turns off and we leave the formal spaces, how do we talk to one another as members of the community? What are our commitments to each other, and how do we uphold those with the highest of integrity, okay? So this is the what, that's the how, all right? And for a year in review, you know, our diversity statistics across the board are fairly decent considering independent schools in the city. So in secondary, or our K through 12 faculty of color, in the secondary is about 37%. K through 12 faculty of color is 37%. Secondary faculty of color alone is 38%. Elementary faculty of color is at 34%. And we've got some really intellectual folks here. 60% are holding advanced degrees, K through 12. So people really do commit to their craft here, and we have a diverse body doing the work. These are very small and hard to read. Sorry if you don't have your glasses. So this is our enrollment data. We're still kind of fine tuning the last few adjustments, but from our admissions office this afternoon or this morning, we can see we have a 7.7% Asian population, 8.6 African American, 4.2 Latinx, 2.2 Middle Eastern, and 25% multiracial. Multiracial does not double count any other category. So these are specific count, 25% of individuals who identify themselves as two or more races and ethnicity. And we are at 50% white students in our enrollment. So broken down by division, 51.9% elementary students of color, 45.7% in the middle school, 47.6% in the high school. Overall students of color is 48.5%. And if you're familiar with our overall goal is to reach 50%. And I think we are well on our way to hitting that goal and that target. Last year, our commitment was really to try to expand our commitment to our Latinx community in our surrounding areas. So we remain committed to that work, as well as just diversifying and making sure as many students as possible have an opportunity to be Campbell Hall students. Really quick, last year there was a ton of great work that was done, led by Sarah and Toya, our co-directors of DEIJ. They led the entire faculty in a K-12 book study of something called Identity Safe Classrooms, where teachers were able to go through a process of thinking about ways to improve their instructional practices to make sure everyone had an opportunity to be seen and represented within the classroom, regardless of identity. Speak Up at School, where we disrupt bias and challenging language across the board with faculty and students. We even have parent sessions for Speak Up at School. So if you've ever been in a situation where you don't know what to say when someone is responding to just an inappropriate comment or an act of bias or a microaggression, we've got educational opportunities for families to learn there as well. So a ton of things happened last year under the theme of community involvement and community belonging. And the team just did a great job of making sure faculty and staff and families felt seen and heard. This year's commitment is school talk, rethinking what we say about and to students every day. And Sarah and Toya added, and colleagues. How do we talk to each other? Okay. Sometimes I could have a bad day and I may say something that wasn't really kind to a colleague. I need to be able to hear that and correct it. I think we could add a comma and say, and families, right? We want to make sure we're communicating properly to each other. If you receive an email from us and we're telling you something your student did, you should still be able to leave with your dignity. You should still be able to say, like, okay, I understand you're giving me some feedback on something my student went through, but I also, I want to be respected in that. I think we do a good job on that, but it's always good to check in. And there's a whole list of other commitments that we're going to maintain across the year, but by and large, we want to make sure that we are going to be accountable, and also we're going to continue to grow. Okay, we're not going to rest on our laurels. Campbell Hall is a very popular place to be for all the right reasons, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to maintain a community that's decent, loving, and responsible. So with that, I just want to kind of part with you some things to understand about equity work when we think about the holistic growth cycle. At Campbell Hall, our equity work is organized. We do not happenstance try to fly with the latest trend. There's a lot of deep work that goes into it, and we are truly trying to consider how it impacts the lives of individuals on any scale. It is growth oriented. Our work is designed to not leave you where we found you, okay? And it's important to understand that we want to make sure that you can go with us on the journey. So that's why we have these types of talks. It's also about an exchange of perspectives. That's storytelling, that's discerning, that's loving, because we do truly need each other to be able to get the best out of this experience. And lastly, remember what's core: our authenticity and our spiritual core. your spiritual core by whatever name you call it. Okay, it is not to be an exclusive ideology, but it is truly what brings you to your feet every morning, what gets you out of bed every morning to show up and keep doing what you do. We want to make sure you have space to honor that as well. Okay, so with that, we've got a ton of things scheduled for the year ahead. We're going to remain committed to our DEIJ work. All right. We're going to spend some time across the year sharing with you our new academic philosophy, which is really an expansion of the one we've already had. Again, our faculty evaluation system is going strong. We're committed to student voice and choice this year. We want students to know their options and their opportunities to celebrate who they are, but also to take care of themselves. Okay. We're going to continue our parent engagement and education to make sure families feel like they have the right information to make the decisions they need to make. And as I shared earlier, our challenge success team of faculty, parents, and students focused on student well-being, engagement, and belonging. So this is what, when you join us next year, we're going to give you the update on these. All right, this is our roadmap for the road ahead. So with that, we'll take a couple questions before we get out of here. Before we do that, I want to remind everybody of our norms. All right, consider other perspectives, deep listening, expect and acknowledge a lack of closure. We may be able to button it up, or you may just need to schedule a meeting and we take some time. Okay, so with that, I thank you. I'm going to pull our slides down, and we're going to get into a little discussion here. So let me do that. How are we doing in the room? Are we all right? Any questions, comments, concerns? Rumors? Okay. Let's see. Some feedback on the survey. The question about a survey taker's ethnicity does not capture a multi-ethnic home. My child is multi-ethnic, and I'm only one ethnicity, and an ethnicity of in a different ethnicity other than my spouse. So the comment is basically saying if you're in a multiracial home, our family survey didn't give you space to actually acknowledge your identity as well as your student's identity. So that's really helpful feedback. And a question on the engagement slide, how it compares to previous years and or other schools. I'm not sure which engagement slide is being referenced here, but as far as the faculty engagement slide, we are using the same software year over year. So we did see about a 10% difference in overall engagement on the faculty staff side this year. And I think in a third year, we'll be able to say a full longitudinal reason as to why. We did see some improvements in other areas. Comparison to other schools.
Challenge success is in its first year.
Yeah, and challenge success data is in its first year. So all the stress and health data that you saw is just year one. So we're in a multi-year commitment to that particular experience. All right, Julian, anything you wanted to stamp or clarify in any particular way? Okay. Well, folks, hey, you know what? Chat's a little empty. It's folks are all smiles here. Oh yeah, smiles. Okay, all right. But we thank you for spending some time with us. We're gonna be hanging out here after, so let's connect. And thank you everyone for tuning in at home. This is being recorded, so we'll dispatch and get this uploaded pretty soon. So thank you, folks. Have a great evening. See you, folks. All right.